Everyone thinks they know themselves until life begins to prove them wrong. You say you know who you are, what you want, where you are going, but just one loss, one love, one silence longer than usual, and suddenly everything you believed about yourself collapses like a sandcastle. The truth is that most people do not know themselves. They merely repeat what the world taught them to call personality. But what if everything you think about yourself were just a poorly told story? What if the you living today were only a character trained to please others? The mind loves to give answers, but self-knowledge is not about answers. It is about courage. Courage to doubt your own narrative, to look inward and realize that perhaps the true self is still hidden, waiting to be found. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the universe has never been in the stars, but in the mirror. Because, in the end, it is not the world that is indecipherable, it is you. And this journey is not for those seeking comfort, but for those seeking truth. If topics such as psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. From which part of the world are you watching this video now? Leave your answer in the comments. The past, the present, and the mirror of consciousness. Imagine if you could go back in time, not to change things, but to relive them with the mind you have today. How would it be to look at your childhood and realize that, in every mistake, there was already a lesson disguised? Most people dream of this chance to redo, but what they are really seeking is a kind of forgiveness. Forgiveness for not having known how to live the present. Perhaps what we call regret is this: consciousness shouting that you were asleep at the wheel of your own life. It is curious because when we look back, everything seems so obvious. The sentence we did not say, the courage we lacked, the love we did not have time to show. But no one is born knowing how to deal with time, this cruel teacher who never repeats the lesson. So what remains is learning to look back, not with guilt, but with curiosity. The past is the only mirror that reflects who you really were without trying to please anyone. When we are young, we believe life will begin later. Later after school, later after work, later after success. But later is the greatest trap of the mind. It creates a tomorrow that never comes and makes us postpone what is essential: living. While we wait for the right moment, time watches us silently and takes away what we had most valuable: presence. It is funny to think that the present has always been the place where everything happens, yet it is the last place we want to be. The mind is always traveling between regrets and expectations, like a tourist who never disembarks. True wisdom may be this: stop trying to control what has already passed and start taking care of the moment that breathes now. Because it is in this second that life asks you for a response. When someone regrets, it is not for the mistake, it is for unconsciousness. It is the shock of realizing that the self that acted back then is not the same as the one existing today. And if you feel shame about the past, it is a sign of growth. It means that you are changing, that the old self no longer serves. Guilt is only the symbolic price of evolution. The secret is not to drown in it, but to learn to swim with what it teaches. Each memory carries an invisible lesson, and it is precisely there, in failures and stumbles, that the soul matures. If you pay attention, you will realize that the past is not dead. It speaks all the time. Sometimes with the voice of a happy memory, other times with the whisper of an old pain. But it is always trying to tell you something. Look at me without fear. I mean trying to understand yourself. And when you understand this, you realize that no one is as wise as the one who accepts having been foolish. True self-knowledge begins when you stop denying the old versions of yourself. Because each one of them, even the ones you prefer to forget, brought you here. The past is not a ghost. It is a file. Every time you revisit it with love, it returns a piece of what you lost. Meaning. But there is a curious detail. The further away something is, the easier it is to judge it. And what if it were possible to observe your own life with the same detachment we use to advise a friend? Perhaps there lies the first step toward wisdom, seeing yourself without a filter as one observes a stranger. And it is at this point that philosophy begins to act, opening the door to the question that changes everything. Who is the self that observes? The self and the invisible mirror of the mind. All philosophy begins with a doubt. And the oldest of them is this: who are you when no one is looking? When Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," he did not want to seem intelligent. He was trying to find something that could not be destroyed by any uncertainty. And what he discovered was frightening: that everything we have most real is inside our head. Everything begins in thought, this invisible stage where the self presents itself every day. But thought is a clever trick. It gives us the sense of control while showing us only a part of the spectacle. It is like watching a movie where the narrator lies all the time, and only at the end do you realize that it was the villain. When we think about who we are actually looking at an edited version of ourselves, a simplified story that consciousness creates to try to understand chaos. The problem is that we confuse this story with the truth. Sartre realized this and gave it an elegant name: transcendence. For him, everything, from an apple to a human being, is beyond our complete understanding. You can look at a fruit from 1,000 angles and still not see everything it is. The same goes for people. When we look at someone, we see only fragments, labels, pieces of a narrative. And deep down, we do this with ourselves all the time. Think about it. If you cannot see an apple entirely, how do you expect to see yourself completely? The self is like a broken reflection. Each thought shows a piece, but never the whole. And the more we try to understand, the more we realize how much we escape from ourselves. That is why the mind is so fascinating and so dangerous at the same time. It is capable of creating entire realities based on fragments. Imagine your consciousness as a flashlight. Everything you illuminate becomes an object, and the rest disappears into darkness. When you direct this light toward the world, things seem clear. But when you turn it toward yourself, the beam confuses, distorts, and you begin to believe that the partial image is all that exists. It is in this game of light and shadow that the ego is born, a character that believes it is the author of its own story when, in fact, it is only the main actor. Sartre said that the ego is not something we discover, but something we invent. That knowing oneself is not opening a hidden chest, but writing, every day, a new chapter. The problem is that we are not always good writers. Sometimes we let fear, comparison, and judgment take the pen from our hand. And when we realize it, we are living a script we did not choose. We are just memorizing it. That is why self-knowledge requires courage. Courage to accept that you are not fixed, that you change your mind, that you feel opposing things, that sometimes you are wise and sometimes a walking disaster. Montaigne said that in the morning he was one person, and after lunch a completely different one. This is not inconsistency. It is humanity. Only those who accept being contradictory can get close to their own truth. But if the self is a creation, not a discovery, an inevitable question arises. Who is writing the story? Is it really you who defines what you think, feel, and believe? Or is there something or someone whispering ideas into your mind, dictating the invisible rules of what it means to be someone in life? The invisible voice that inhabits your mind. There is a voice inside your head that speaks all the time. It comments on everything: what you wear, what you do, what you feel. Sometimes it is sweet, other times cruel. Sometimes it seems like your mother, other times your worst enemy. But the strangest thing is that most of the time, this voice is not even yours. It is an inheritance. a mixture of expectations, fears, and patterns that society implanted in you since childhood while calling it education. Heidegger called this entity das Man, the they. It is the invisible set of rules that tells you how you must live, think, love, and even suffer. It is what whispers that you need to be someone in life without ever explaining what that means. From an early age, we are trained to conform to this invisible standard. And, little by little, we transform into characters trying to please an audience that does not even exist. Think about it. How many decisions have you made of your own free will, and how many were made to be accepted? How many times have you said, yes, while your soul screamed no? The they is subtle. It disguises itself as common sense, as well-intentioned advice, as a mother's phrase, or as a motivational post. It teaches you to seek approval before even knowing what authenticity is. And when you realize it, you no longer live. You merely play a role. The most dangerous thing is that the they does not need to raise its voice. It speaks through silence. It is in comparisons and pressures in the models of success that surround you. It is in the influencer you follow, in the fear of being left behind, in the desire to appear right in the eyes of others. The they is the imaginary audience that evaluates everything you do and condemns you whenever you dare to be different. When we grow up in demanding environments, this voice becomes especially cruel. You can be kind, talented, generous, and still feel insufficient. Because, in your head, the voice repeats, you should be more. This simple phrase carries a subtle poison, the poison of the ideal. The more you try to be better, the farther you feel from who you are. And that is how the they wins, convincing you that your essence is never enough. Heidegger said that you do not need a difficult childhood to carry this voice. It is enough to exist in a sick culture. And perhaps he was right. We live in a time when everyone seems to be comparing themselves to everyone else all the time. Success has become a religion, and happiness an unattainable goal. The result is a generation of brilliant but exhausted minds, prisoners of a standard that no one has ever questioned. The internet has only made this game worse. Every screen is a distorted mirror reflecting prettier, richer, happier versions than you. And as you observe these images, something inside you begins to whisper, something is missing. But what is missing? No one knows. Only that this emptiness feeds the system. The more insecure you feel, the more you consume. Dissatisfaction has become an economic project. They want you to believe that your pain is an individual flaw, but it is collective. It is the price you pay for living in a world that sells masks and calls it identity. And when you begin to listen to this voice carefully, something changes. You realize that perhaps it has never been you. And this is where true self-knowledge begins, at the moment you decide to ask, who is speaking inside my head? The silence between the voice and the listener Socrates believed that wisdom was not in answers, but in questions. And perhaps that is why he disturbs so many people, because asking questions is dangerous. When you begin to ask, why do I think this way? Who taught me to feel this? Something inside you begins to collapse. The old mental structure, built with opinions and certainties of others, begins to tremble. And in this earthquake, space emerges where the self can finally breathe. Socratic philosophy was simple: converse, listen, doubt. But in a world accustomed to shouting, silence has become revolutionary. Most people cannot endure the emptiness of their own mind. They flee it with noise, distraction, work, relationships. But self-knowledge requires precisely the opposite: being alone with your own thoughts until the inner noise begins to make sense. The human mind simplifies everything it touches. It is its way of surviving. That is why, when you try to understand what you feel, it creates shortcuts. I am anxious. I am lazy. I am insufficient. These labels seem like truths, but they are only emotional laziness. They are ways of not looking deeply at what frightens you. But Socrates, if he were here, would say with a smile, then question even the label. The voice inside your head is not the problem. The problem is believing that it is you. Try observing what it says without reacting. When it whispers, "You are not good enough," respond mentally, "Interesting. Who is saying this?" This simple question has the power to disarm years of conditioning. Because the truth is that when the voice speaks, there is always someone listening, and that someone is your true self. But this is where things get intense. The more you try to observe yourself, the more the mind resists. It begins to scream, to accuse, to distract. It is the ego fighting for its own survival. It knows that if you see who you really are, the disguise falls. And when the disguise falls, power changes hands. It is the birth of consciousness and the death of the illusion of control. Deep down, self-knowledge is a process of disidentification. You are not fear, nor desire, nor the voices that judge you. You are the one who perceives them. This perception is simple but transformative. It is as if the light of consciousness switches on, and for the first time, you see the entire stage, not just the role you are playing. Socrates used to repeat, "I only know that I know nothing," not as a gesture of humility, but as a reminder of freedom. When you accept that you do not know everything about yourself, you open space to grow, change, and reinvent yourself. The problem is that the modern world convinces you otherwise, that you must have quick answers, a defined identity, an opinion about everything. But perhaps true wisdom is allowing yourself to be a mystery in progress. And in the end, when silence arrives and the voice tires of fighting, something different happens. You feel a strange, almost sacred calm. It is the moment when the observer awakens, and for the first time, the self recognizes itself not as the story, but as the one who narrates it. This is where the journey truly begins. But what happens when you finally realize that none of what you believed yourself to be is really you? So, after all of this, what do you think? Do you really know yourself? Or have you just gotten used to the version the world told you about? Perhaps this is the question that defines all human life. Because knowing oneself is not reaching an end, but beginning a quest that never ends. Now, I want to know from you, what struck you most in this video? And which philosopher, thinker, or character do you want to see in the next one? It can be someone who intrigues you, inspires you, or even provokes anger. Because, deep down, every emotion is an invitation to understand yourself better. If this video made you think, if any part of it sparked something inside you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. This way, you continue following the next philosophical investigations and maybe discover another fragment of who you really are. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. And if everything you believe about yourself is only a reflection of someone else's gaze, click now on one of the videos beside you and start breaking this mirror. You will have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?